For Matt Waverley.
Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I'll just note the member for Roeville's question about there, when is the next lockdown? Good question. There is no accurate answer to that, but what I think we can all, if we're really honest with ourselves, what we can all say is that there will be another outbreak somewhere, and it may be Victoria, it may be New South Wales, it may be Queensland or WA or New Zealand or Taiwan or Singapore or any of the other countries that are lucky enough to not be swamped by what is a global pandemic. About almost a year ago, I remember someone explaining to me what the definition of a pandemic was. About a quarter of the world's population are likely to get the disease in a pandemic if presumably vaccines and things aren't available. And we're not there yet, thankfully, but with numbers in the UK and the US and elsewhere, it's certainly heading there. When you include India, Africa, the places in the world that might not get vaccines as quickly as we do, the prospects for some of those poor people are not good. And we have had our share, and the opposition are entitled to argue from their point of view that things should have been better. And I think we would all agree that the things that we've learnt, if we'd known then, we might have done them better. There's been talk about the numbers of people that have very tragically lost their lives. And, you know, when we go back to April last year, the consensus Australia-wide from the HPPC was still that masks weren't necessary. It's not necessarily what I saw in Glen Waverley from the Chinese Australians, because people with family and friends who'd lived in China through the SARS outbreak, the moment this disease came through, on went the masks. In hindsight, they were right. But you've got to trust the evidence and the experience of the people who we trust to be our experts. Now, you might disagree with them, others might disagree with them, and there will be countering views within those expert bodies. Not every person will agree 100%. But we need to take the consensus, because without it, it's chaos. Different states have had different readings, and we still have National Cabinet and AHPBC that is bringing them together. And our last lockdown of 5 days, the Prime Minister said, we've dealt with these outbreaks before, got on top of them before, in the last few weeks in Sydney, Brisbane and Perth. He also said, a proportionate response by the Victorian government that enabled the contact tracers and others to be able to get on top of it and get the same successful result we've seen in other states. They're not my words, Acting Speaker, they are the Prime Minister of Australia. The main objective of this bill today is to extend the state of emergency, and I accept that the opposition happily, at the premise of their statements, accept that a 4-week extension is necessary. So we're not even really arguing that we shouldn't extend it at all, we're arguing about how long. They concede it needs to be extended. So how long? So let's think about that. The state of emergency as we stand gets renewed every 4 weeks. I think we all know that in this House. The Chief Health Officer gives his advice, tables the reasoning and the advice, and it gets extended for another 4 weeks. So in essence, if you are happy, if the opposition are happy, Acting Speaker, to extend it for 4 weeks, that's what we're doing. And then the extension of the maximum time limit allows us to do that again. Now, yes, we could legislate every tiny little detail about what the CHO, the Chief Health Officer, recommends. We could come back again and again and again. We could have the legal boffins draw up all the legislation in the world, and we could argue it in this House, and I would be more than happy to do that, except delay, delay, delay. And when you consider the things that we have learnt in the last 12 months, and you consider that you want to get all those people working to legislate, to brief, do all this stuff on something that might change twice in 2 weeks, I caution you and the rhetoric that is, I caution the opposition, Acting Speaker, and the rhetoric that is coming that those delays could be fatal for people. During the course of the lockdown, obviously aged care was a massive problem. Now, I'm not going to lay into our federal colleagues, and just like I'm not laying into anyone else who has worked their tail off to try and protect Australian and Victorian citizens. But what I will say is that there was an aged care home, and I won't name it because it's not their fault. There was an aged care home in my area that on 1 week had no cases. The next week had 35 cases, and the next week after had 43 cases. It was contained around that point, but we lost 5 people's lives. If we knew everything 12 months ago, would it have been better? Maybe. But I say to you again, there will be more outbreaks. Here, there, anywhere, because no system of containment is perfect. We do everything we can to approach the perfect, and we learn and we come back and we make it better and we make it better. And I was speaking to a local GP in my area last week who was saying, Matt, we really need to do something about single level quarantining away from hotels. I agree with him. And I was delighted to hear that is exactly what we're doing. But again, 12 months ago almost, in March, the states all got together with National Cabinet and AHPBC agreeing and all the state CHOs agreeing that hotel quarantine was the way to go. They all agreed. I would think we've learnt that, yes, we've all done a pretty good job. When it gets out, it's not good. And when it got out last year, by the time we realised where it was really not good. I think since then, when you look at the Black Rock cluster, when you look at the speed of our contact tracers, the efforts that this government has made to close the gaps, I'm not going to talk about standards of whichever, metal you want to choose, but every state is doing everything they can. And every state has had outbreaks. And you can quibble about, well, all of Victoria was shut down, only the Northern Beaches was shut down, and I can quibble about, well, there's a spit access there, and then it did expand to Greater Sydney, and you can make other quibbles, and others can, and we can argue all the finer details, and that's what this place is for. So that's fine. That's our job, to talk about the details. But at the end of the day, we've shown that our contact tracers are up to it. And yes, we locked down for 5 days in a snap lockdown, just like South Australia and Western Australia and Queensland have done. And others say, well, yes, why did you knock down Mildura? I heard from one of the opposite members. The outbreak was potentially at an airport where people go everywhere. And the contact tracers needed time. And we gave them that time. And it was hard. And for some people, it was very, very hard. This is not over. It's a lot better than many other places, and we want to keep it that way. And this bill does exactly the work to help us do that.
Member for Kew.